Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. We're back. Well, after a long weekend, um, we have a Stanley Cup final. The Dallas Stars bow out in 6 games to the Vegas Golden Knights. They will start the Stanley Cup final on Saturday. Russ will be making his way to sunny, warm, and gambling haven, Las Vegas, Nevada, later in the week. But before that, we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, so let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins, who gets released really at a bad time because really a lot of teams now in the NFL are capped out. He's a good receiver. I don't think he's what he was, so I think there's something about that. And I just love how instantly he gets tied to the Jets
and the Giants and the Bills and the Chiefs and the Browns and the Patriots. It's ridiculous.
Like the Jets first. Like all of a sudden, like the Jets have 4 or 5 good receivers. They're not going to do this. It would cause cap mayhem, and they need to keep like a little cap space open in case they have an issue, like Quinton Williams holding out or something like that. So, yeah, they're not doing it.
Well, okay, because you're focused on the Jets because that's who you follow and cover, and it made just as much news in Buffalo because when he was being shopped before the draft, Buffalo, Kansas City, and a couple other teams were at the head of the list. Now, part of that was Arizona retaining salary on his contract and extending and renegotiating void years and all this stuff that they do. Now that he's released, now that there's no retention of salary, basically it's where can he get the best deal? He can't get the best deal from teams like the Bills and the Chiefs because not that they're capped out, but the only thing they can really offer is incentive-laden contracts. And this is sort of proof is in the pudding here. It's like, okay, if you want to play with them so bad, then take a 1-year incentive-based contract. And, then once you put up good numbers with a team that can throw like with Mahomes or with Josh Allen, then, you can maybe line yourself up with a better deal. I'm not going to hold my breath that he's going to do that. He's going to go to Cleveland. He's going to go someplace where he can make the most money. There's rumor about him playing with Deshaun Watson, who he played with in Houston. And that's fine. It's like, I like as a Bills fan, him with Diggs and Davis and the kid that they just drafted in the first round and some of the other weapons that they have is very intriguing. I'd love to see it. I just don't know whether we're gonna see it. Cav, we're talking about Deshaun Watson and him being released by Arizona, and now
DeAndre Hopkins.
DeAndre Hopkins. And one of the rumors is him going to Cleveland and playing with Deshaun Watson. And, he posts a picture on Instagram with they're watching in a gym. They're watching the New England Patriots, like the Super Bowl highlights of Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. So automatically everybody's assuming that means he wants to go to the Patriots.
Put a Jets logo up too, Mike.
Yeah. It was on the crawl, so they had to zoom in just to get the Jets logo. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, but it always strikes me whenever these kind of things happen in the NFL, how different the fan base is versus in the NFL versus the NHL. Can you imagine if a player of that magnitude was just released in the NHL? Like it would be like it would not be accepted.
No.
Where in the NFL, the fan base, because of the way the situation is, just well, what are they going to do? They got cap issues. What are they going to do? So
that's true.
Like, and in the NHL, like you would never consider, like the fan base would say that's mismanagement of the cap by the GM, but that's not the way it is in the NFL. They're just far more accepting of just dropping a guy who's a real significant player. Like it's not like he's. Yeah,
and he's not over the hill. He's still got something left.
No, for sure. So, but it's just, I just always feel so sorry for NFL players. And people say, they make millions. Well, some of them do for sure, but the career expectancy is so much lower, and they just don't have protections, and it's just they get taken advantage of by friends and family members and
representatives and things of that nature.
Yeah, well, that happens in the NHL as well, but
Sure.
but still, I just think the severity of the injuries in football, and just the number of injuries you have. I just don't think you can escape it. I mean, there are NHL players who go through careers who don't have significant injuries, and it doesn't seem like football players rarely go through their career unscathed. So.
One more note. I think it was Anthony who put up this tweet from Bob Brookover, who writes for the Star Ledger, which, to be honest, I didn't even know the Star Ledger's been around anymore, but he writes for NewJersey.com. So it's probably that's where this article probably resides. He's probably got Star Ledger for where he used to write. Anyhow, he's trying to sell mostly Giants fans, I think, but the New York area that, sorry, Jets fans, the Giants have the better quarterback. Giants have the Big Apple's best quarterback, and here's why Daniel Jones is better than Aaron Rodgers. Like, if anybody clicks on that article, shame on you. There's not a person on earth or in the NFL or even in Daniel Jones's family that believes that.
Right. Just one note on this. What's that?
I was asking if Kev had a thought, but maybe he's
No, I'll just say I don't have a thought. Aaron Rodgers is one of the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks of all time. Daniel Jones couldn't shine his shoes. So that's how ridiculous that friggin' argument is.
Kev, your thought?
On
just having, that lead in from Twitter for an article based on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, the whole thing is ludicrous too. It's, it's just funny because that coincides with, I work for the Hockey Now group, and there was a group discussion about, this is the silly season, as the golf calls it when they do these kind of things. But in hockey, when you just see all kinds of crazy speculation and stuff, and you got to consider the source and all this stuff. People are just, trying to create, content for the off season. And, the silly part about it is there's plenty to talk about that's real in the off season now in the NHL. There's lots going on, and even beyond the Stanley Cup final. I mean, good heavens, people are still trying to figure out who the Toronto Maple Leafs general manager is going to be. They don't, need all that. So, that whole thing is ludicrous.
I'm going to answer the chat room too. Tony Soprano says, don't slander Danny Dimes because he's a Giants fan. I got a news for Tony Soprano. You're like number 3 on the mobster list. You're not even number 1, so pipe down.
First it's Michael Corleone, and then the Whitey Bulger, and then it's Tony. Yeah.
But Tony Soprano's number 1 on our fan list. He's with us. Tony's with us. I'm all about Tony. So
I wanted to bring this up, and then I was going to bring up the Celtics thing, but it's the coming back from 3-0. But just on this point of the conversation, over the weekend, and I didn't watch one full episode of Succession, but I know a lot of people that did, and the character Logan Roy, which was basically he's the Rupert Murdoch character in Succession. They were talking about like all the HBO shows and who was like the big dog of them all. And essentially they said, well, Logan Roy was number 2 behind Tony Soprano.
That's fair.
Honestly, I liked The Sopranos. I just, I didn't. Okay. And maybe it's because of my Italian background. I thought it was sort of a dark comedy of mob stuff. It was, to me, it didn't ring true.
To me, it was believable.
And with Jersey, I mean, that was the, on top of,
But I grew up with the Long Island mob. Even that was different, but it was believable because of the suburbs part of it. Mm-hmm. And I lived in the suburbs, and I knew that there were mob people that didn't live too far from me. To me, that was believable. Like, I think the other aspect is, Mike, we have to take into consideration who knew who James Gandolfini was before that series.
I knew him as a character actor, but nothing.
Most people didn't know who the hell he was.
Well, yeah, I mean that's true. I mean,
everybody knew who he was from that series. Like everybody watched that series. Most everybody.
He blew up with that, but he was in Crimson Tide, and he was in a few other movies. But because I'm a movie buff, I knew who he was. But yeah, that.
Yeah, what's The Sopranos did is the first kind of mob show where we saw, like mob members having to deal with the everyday,
Right.
the routine, their kids graduating from high school, their kids staying out late, having to deal with parental things and, with, family issues and all
Going
that.
to a therapist.
Yeah, all that stuff. So it was,
like
it
when
was
his kid said no effing ziti at the party, like I related to that because
That was in
it was the one thing he was lowered to. Then all of a sudden it wasn't there. Like that's great.
That was in the first episode. But no, but they were talking about like the signature characters from each of the franchises. And honestly, like I always thought one of the best franchises on HBO was Deadwood.
No doubt.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And Al Swearingen, Ian McShane, that character. I mean, nobody was more devious and more evil, and also had that he was three-dimensional. I always thought like I'm listening to somebody talk about Logan Roy and Soprano. I'm like, no mention of Swearingen. I'm like, he's way up there in terms of those.
He's top five. I put Logan Roy ahead of him too. You don't have to always be the physical threat. Logan Roy was going to cut your throat financially, and sometimes that's more dangerous.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, and you could sort of sense his power there's a subtlety to it as well. And, I mean, it's an incredible show. I did watch it. I am not caught up, though, so I have not. But I know already what's happened.
I'm not saying a thing.
No. But, I mean, I've already seen people have commented on it.
Are they really doing that already? Okay.
Yeah, so
right after spoilers were flying all over Twitter.
Yeah, I don't lose my mind over that. If I find out, I find out. I mean, I'm still going to watch it, So
sure.
Yeah. I mean, I've really enjoyed that show. The one thing about that show that's going to be memorable to me is the children all talked in this kind of stunted way where it was sort of like machine gun bursts, like 7 words, stop. 7 words, and they all talk that way. I wonder if one of them had started it and everybody started picking it up because it was just kind of odd. But if you ever watch an episode, just the way they talk to me was very unusual. It's in little short bursts. They have their senses.
I mean, the thing is, it might be a show that down the line I'll watch, but I got like about 15 minutes into one episode and just didn't really jump to it. Whereas the other ones, I immediately, Game of Thrones, I started watching and kept watching. But that show didn't. I don't know. It was just weird. Anyway, all right, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, May 30th, 2023.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. So, okay, let's start with we now have a Stanley Cup final, Kev. The Dallas Stars lose 6-0 to the Vegas Golden Knights. I was at the Rochester Americans Hershey Bears Calder Cup Eastern Conference final, so I wasn't able to watch the game until I got out and then was watching with one eye as I'm driving down the 90. But it wasn't much of a game when I started watching.
No.
4-0. Really, it was a no-show by the Dallas Stars in a game that you wouldn't think that they would no-show.
Well, I mean, again, I don't think you're giving Vegas enough credit.
No,
I mean, I thought Vegas essentially was the best. The best teams in both series won.
Yes.
There was no.
Yeah.
I mean, those were the better teams. They were playing the best, and I think Vegas was sort of embarrassed is too strong a word, but I think they were upset at themselves that they just didn't get this done. And then they came out and just played what I thought was a great game. They got it all done. I thought it was somewhat fitting that, there's 6 guys on that team and the 4 of them were involved in the scoring, 2 goals and an assist by Carlson, and Marchessault had a goal, and Carrier was involved, and Riley Smith had 2 assists. So all the misfits from the original team were still going strong. And of course, Shea Theodore's on that defense, and McNabb was also on that team. So I really, I think they've been impressive all the way through, and give Aiden Hill some credit. I mean, good Lord, I don't think any of us, at least I didn't anyway, thought he was going to be able to deliver the way he has.
I didn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've seen this before. As much as and I am totally guilty of this. Like I follow almost all of the what the sayings of playoffs, like you need a playoff goalie and all that, but history kind of proves that you just need a hot goalie, so and he's played well, so
it's true. I had told Mike the other day, like days and days ago, I thought that Dallas would win those games with Ben out because they were going to sort of like, hey, we're going to do this for the captain, and they did. And then I told Mike that Vegas was going to win this game because it's too hard to keep climbing that mountain for Dallas mentally. And I do think that Vegas squashed their hopes quickly, and I think that was the right way to do it because I felt like if Vegas would have fallen behind in that game, like 1 or 2-0, then maybe Dallas would have felt like a surge. So they all credit to Vegas. They took the life right out of them, and the little part of that mountain that Dallas clawed up, they kicked them right off it.
Yeah, well, there was a commonality from in what happened in the NBA Game 7 and what happened with Vegas. Both teams, Miami and Vegas, jumped on the home teams early, shut down any kind of momentum from the home crowd, any kind of emotion, and kept their foot on their neck and killed them both. And that, the Celtics tried to climb back into that game a couple times. I think they got within 7 or 8, but never could get any closer. And once Vegas got 3 goals in the first period, 2 from the fourth line, 1 from Carrier, 1 from Keegan Colasar. And pretty much it was over. I mean, I started watching in the second period, Kev, and that's why I was making. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Vegas. They were very good, but there was just no motion. There was nothing left with Dallas in the middle of the second period. There was no life at all. And once they made it 4-0, it was completely over with.
Yeah, I mean, but I think Russ hit the nail on the head. I think that was all because Vegas flexed its muscle early on and kind of showed they weren't going to be denied. And I think what you really saw there was, kind of the frustration / acceptance of their fate by Dallas that that the Vegas Golden Knights were not going to be denied. But what a success story too the Golden Knights are when you just think about since 2018. I mean, this is really an incredible statistic. Of course, we all know the Tampa Bay Lightning lead the NHL in playoff series wins since 2018 because they've been to 3 finals and won 2 of them. But second is the Golden Knights, second with 10 series wins since 2018. And of course, that's when they started in the league. Like talk about hitting the ground running, like they did. I mean, it's really impressive what they've done. And I thought it was interesting too. Stone's comments after the game, there was the normal, usual dribble that you hear from people about, can't wait. We got unfinished business and all that. But Stone said, I'm just thankful that they let us, have another crack at this. Like he said, we didn't make the playoffs last year, and yet we came back and, we got to, go for it again. And, that's true. I mean, they could have made significant changes, but they chose not to do that.
Yeah, he thanked management. I thought that was really classy on his part and,
Me too.
And poignant, and it did fit. Also, I want to give credit to somebody who I really thought was a good player back in the day, and that's J.M. Marshall. The funny thing is I think he's the most valuable player for Vegas because I think he's scoring all the big goals. Jack Eichel has more points. I get it. But he's got 9 goals, and he seems to be the guy that is scoring them almost out of nowhere. When you're not expecting it, all of a sudden he steps up. And I think he's the guy, him, and then we have to mention William Karlsson just as a shutdown guy has been the best shutdown guy in these playoffs.
And he's got 10 goals. He
just set a new
goals too. It's true.
He just set a new record for Vegas. And
it's crazy how good Karlsson's been too. So I mean,
for those people though who say, oh, those deadline deals never matter, never. Look at what Barbashev is doing right now with Vegas. He's been he's been on that line with Marchessault and Eichel, and that line has been easily their best line.
Now they gave up a good player for Marcia. I mean, they did for Barbashev. Zach Keen's going to be a really good player. So that's something where, it'll hurt them down the line, but it's helping them now. So you don't mind. But look, as far as Florida goes, I think the time off is good and bad for like Bob, because he was losing a lot of weight during the playoffs. So he'll be able to get that back. But again, I've seen Bob when he comes off of a rest or whatever, and he's not sharp. Right. I do think it's a detriment for Florida to have all this time off. I don't think it's good at all.
Yeah. Now, I have a little bit of bone to pick as Eck joins us here. A little bit of bone to pick with the NHL, but I understand the reason why they did it with the schedule that came out for the final. Now, the final doesn't start until Saturday, and I'm matching up with the NBA final, which is Denver and Miami, what their schedule is. They're starting on they're starting on Thursday. Okay, so the Stanley Cup final starts on Saturday. Then the NBA final game 2 is on Sunday. So there's not one day when both the NBA final and the Stanley Cup final are on the same day, which is smart programming on the part of the NHL. But the NBA final is going to be on ABC, and the Stanley Cup final is exclusively going to be on TNT. I mean, here's the downside to them going away from the NBC contract. They're not on broadcast television. They're on TNT, and I think TNT is in like 92% of the households, but it's way down the cable schedule. I think the ratings are going to be hurt. You're going to see the NBA Finals numbers, even though it's not a sexy matchup, Denver, Miami, they're going to dwarf the NHL's.
Well, they would anyhow, wouldn't they?
They would for sure.
Mike, you're not totally wrong. I mean, like, obviously, like, this is a downside, right? But I guess you have to look at the whole picture of it, like the whole season, like, what do you get out of this? I mean, I think it's easier now to watch all the games than it was before, in general, for people. The streaming is better than it was, I think. I mean, it's hard to say,
I agree with Mike on this one, but I'm not so sure they're better off now. I mean, there's just so much complaining about, not everybody's as tech savvy as this group minus me is. And you do hear a lot of people complaining about not knowing quickly how to find the games, and I do think there's a level of frustration.
There is
with it, where NBC, God bless NBC. NBC changed everything for the NHL because they committed to, we're going to love you to death,
right,
and they did. And ESPN treated them so poorly, and then they made hockey the focal point of their station. They put games on network television. The Stanley Cup final and everything else. And I think there is something to that. I mean, there are still people in this country whose only source of television is regular TV.
Yeah,
that's true.
Third to ESPN. It's behind right now the NBA and baseball. So even that Sunday night baseball game factors into the what the Stanley Cup game, and so they're not going to go up against it.
Yeah, that Edmonton-Vegas game had to start at 11 o'clock because of Sunday night baseball. And
I also do think that this is a very, very underwhelming Stanley Cup final. And ESPN looks at it like these are two teams that are just not a lot of juice.
Well, here's where I'll fight back on that. I understand that on the surface, right? But I am truly excited about at least covering a cup where somebody's going to win it for the first time.
Sure.
And to me, when a franchise wins it for the first time, it's special. I saw Tampa do it. I saw Carolina do it. And I got to tell you, it's amazing if you get to be a part of those celebrations because you just see things that you're just like, wow, this is really like nice.
St. Louis.
Haven't we seen a bunch of new teams winning over the last several years? It seems like I think it's become a lot more common.
It's more common, but we also, Washington winning it, right? Like there were certain things, like there definitely are teams that, but the other thing about this is it does feel like the same teams are always there. You know, they're the same. It feels like the same teams are always. It's always like Boston and Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Are always there. One of the two of them is always there. You know, Colorado, Tampa. Obviously, Tampa's always there. So it feels like this is what. But that doesn't mean like I'm very excited for the Stanley Cup. But like watching both of these teams play up till now, I am really looking forward to this matchup. Like I think this is going to be a hell of a matchup.
Well, and maybe we shouldn't care. Like this is my thought on it. Like, you know, one thing that we've learned about the NHL playoffs is they're not like the other sports. Like our pyramid is upside down. The most interest we have in the playoffs is the first round because we have a lot of teams in it. Everybody's watching their game. They're paying attention to other games because they think their team's going to win in the series. And then we lose people as we go along. So when you get to the final, you know, and I've told this story before of how hard it is to get readership on off days on the Stanley Cup final. Like people do pay attention to the games, but they're not invested. We don't get those hardcore, you know, just pay attention to hockey. I think in Canada you have some of those. And Buffalo, I mean, Buffalo is always the leader in non-participant fan people watching the games. But we don't have those people, so let's stop worrying about them. Like, who cares whether we have major markets? Because we're not getting those fans anyway. So let's just be excited when we have a good matchup like this one, which is, you know, these are entertaining teams with guys playing, you know, like we were just talking before you came on here, Ak, about, you know, Carlson playing so well and Marchessault playing well. Those are not big names, but they're playing great hockey. So, like, we care about that. You care about that. I care about that.
Yeah, no, and there's something to be said about the winning percentage of the friggin' Vegas Golden Knights in the playoffs. Like, it is an astonishing thing. Like,
well, yeah, 10 playoff series wins since 2000.
Well, until the Cup. Then Washington didn't have that hard a time with them.
Well, no, but they, you know, they won a game too. I mean, they were an expansion team.
Oh no, I get it. From that perspective, it was.
Yeah,
so they've been in the league. You know, their winning percentage, like whenever you look at all the winning percentages, right? You know, since the beginning of time, obviously theirs is the highest by far. I mean, it used to be the Canadians was the highest, right? But now, you know, because they've only played in this many seasons or what have you, you know, the Vegas Golden Knights percentage is like almost 700 or something like that, right? So it's ridiculous.
Well,
percentage is even better. Like it's like that's what's crazy about it.
I'll say this though, with the success that Seattle had in their second season. And now Vegas being in the Stanley Cup final for the second time in their sixth season. Established franchises like Buffalo, who have been around since 1970 and who have not made the playoffs in 12 years, their fan bases are even more pissed off because of that.
I got a great point on that, Mike, and that's a great. So last week I did a big survey about, like, you know, how when there were 4 teams left, who people wanted to win the Stanley Cup. And I did it on Twitter. I actually, the first time I ever promoted a tweet, because I just wanted to get a ton of things. I wanted to get a ton of responses to it, right? And just, you know, and I was shocked by the results because, like, you guys maybe see all the results. I don't know if you did or not, but what would did any of you see it, or any of you paying attention?
I did not see it.
Cool. Anyway, but that's all right. I'm just kidding. I know we're all working anyway. But you know. But yeah, so who do you think of the 4 teams that were left last week? Who do you think was the and no one in the chat room, because hopefully you guys paid attention. No, but who do you think was the team?
The team that fans wanted to see win the least,
the most,
or the most
of those 4 teams.
Carolina,
probably Florida, because there's
I would say Florida, since they were the big underdog.
It was overwhelmingly Florida. Like it wasn't even close, and
it's a good story. That's why. And
you know, and so then I went on even further, and I said to people, okay, tell me why. You know, tell me your favorite team and why, because I know there's chances are the people who are going to my website, none of these 4 teams are their favorite team, right? So I'm thinking to myself, okay, tell me your favorite team and then tell me why. And what Mike brought up there just there, which my wife brought up last night too while she was watching the game because she was pulling for Dallas, is Vegas hasn't earned it, right? Like the fans of Vegas haven't earned it. And that was overwhelmingly thought about. Like, they're too young. People in Buffalo have suffered. People in Toronto have suffered. And fans really have like a spiteful feeling about the Vegas Golden Knights. You know what? It's very fascinating. I've never seen it before, like anything like that.
Because, you know, you have to ask those fan bases again. I think an advantage, and it went away for Vegas, but an advantage that an expansion team has is you've got a clean slate on the cap. And until you can get to a clean slate on the cap in this league, you're severely hampered. And so that's a thing. And so, yes, could the Sabres have done this a little faster? Yeah, I think it's not unreasonable for their fans to say maybe this year should have been the year. And Mike and I felt like, hey, if they stepped it up to the deadline, it might have been the year. So sometimes that's on management too.
Oh, no question about it. No question about it. I was just kind of, now and people love underdogs, right? So that Florida had that going for them, obviously. Everybody loves a good underdog story. There's no question about that. But but the overwhelmingness of it to me was really kind of surprising. Like it was really just, I'm trying to bring up the exact numbers for you. I'm bringing them up right now. So the numbers here's the numbers for you. This is pretty crazy. So there were 2,450 votes. Florida at 57.6%, Carolina at 10.2%, Vegas at 17.1%, and Dallas at 15%. So Vegas was the second most popular team, but people who replied, and there were lots of replies.
I wonder why Carolina was the least.
I would have thought that Carolina would have beaten out Dallas maybe a little bit, but
I would have thought they would. I'm surprised. See, I don't know. Maybe Carolina has too many haters because everybody knows how good they are. Yeah. And if they eliminated their favorite team or something like that, they're not going to vote for them. Florida hasn't hurt anybody other than the Bruins. You know what I mean? They haven't hurt enough fan bases yet.
I'll give you a reason why I think Carolina would be the least. One, the post game celebration is looking at which is not, they haven't been doing that the last couple of years now.
Yeah,
but that was seen by other fan bases as them trolling other teams, and their owner isn't exactly very popular either. So I think those
are lack of star power. Like I think Brent Burns is the first star power guy they've had.
Aho is a star.
He is a star, but he's not a star power guy.
That's fair. You're right. He's not.
There's certain guys that just have a personality that they take with them.
Yeah. I mean, people know that he's a great player, but I don't think yet they've discovered. They haven't gone far enough. And
Svechnikov's a star. I mean, he got hurt this year, but he's a star.
He's a star, but
you see on the ice that you just know who they are right away. Like when they skate up the ice.
Mm-hmm.
Aho looks like a lot of other guys. Svechnikov looks like a lot of other guys. But Burns, he's Burns. He's a defenseman coming up, big laboring guy, huge. Head of hair, big beard.
He's got snakes in an RV and all that stuff.
Got a zoo back in Dallas. He's just an incredible thing. So I think that people who, when they don't, as much as we don't think the NHL is star driven, I think it is when it comes to fans watching other teams that aren't their own team. I think it becomes star driven at that point. That's where Crosby not, and let Elliot Friedman brought up a thing that I've been talking about forever, which I thought was really interesting the other day, by the way, along those lines. Is this whole Florida thing doesn't happen if Chicago doesn't beat Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh? Which remember that second to last day of the season,
and Columbus.
No, but it was Chicago beating eliminating Pittsburgh that put Florida in, because Pittsburgh lost to Columbus, right? But you think that Pittsburgh, they were already out at that point.
I mean, there was a series of like, I'm sorry, Kev, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm just going to say that this goes into my argument about why it's okay to have a one-game playoff, because you're just moving that from the 82nd game to the 83rd game. What's the difference? It still comes down to one thing. So, you're absolutely right. We wouldn't have the Panthers if that doesn't happen. And, that's why we should have rat tail, one game, single elimination playoff.
And I was talking to Buffalo reporters yesterday at the Rochester game. And I'm like, okay, down the stretch, again, and I'll bang on this point forever. Yeah. Had the Sabres traded for a goaltender at the deadline, even a stopgap goalie, somebody who was better than Eric Comrie or better than Craig Anderson or better than the inconsistent Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen before they got Devin Levi, and they didn't know whether Devin Levi was going to even play. He could have gone to the Frozen Four, and they weren't going to. Had they gone out and gotten a goaltender and got one more win against somebody, they would have made the playoffs over Florida.
I know. But when you look at the last month of the season, Florida is the third best team in the division. They were really good. And
that's how close it was, though, with the Sabres. Like Mike's right.
The Sabres were the fourth best team, I think, if I remember right. Yeah. And they really, both those teams came on strong late. But and Florida got healthy late and everything like that. So, I also asked the survey of people about the general manager of the year award. I want to talk to you guys about that for a second, just because I want people. What I know, since you guys obviously don't pay attention to anything I do, you don't have any idea what the results are to this one either.
No, I see some of your dumb Facebook posts, Zach. I do.
My Facebook posts
I will say that I know
That's
for
what happens when
sure.
you block somebody.
I don't have to poll anyone to know that general manager is the least popular award.
Yeah.
without even polling or anything.
Yeah.
It has. I feel comfortable in saying that it has not resonated with the fan base, the GM of the Year award. So
I think that's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, it
get a lot of responses. I got something like 1,500 responses to this one.
Yeah.
As well. This was overwhelmingly. Who do you think?
It started out on a bad footing too, because I think it was started by GMs to honor themselves. So
Right.
So that's how it got off to a bad foot, because if you remember how crazy it was too. So plus one thing we should, before we go to that, I want to bring this up, or else we're going to forget. We need to talk about, and maybe we're well beyond this now, the idea of non-traditional markets. I know the league just has a small house when people start talking about that, because those days are gone. But, as someone who covered the league a long time, and Russ is certainly going to remember this, the idea of bringing in like the Floridas and the Vegases, like there are so many people that were pretty much like Mike in terms of, just being, I mean, I don't know if Mike was against expanded, but I'm saying, how Mike gets where he gets all worked up.
Oh, yeah.
There were a lot of people like that about
I
bringing in these non-traditional markets. And,
hockey,
here we are later, and we got Vegas and Florida.
We're old enough when people were complaining that Washington was an untraditional market. Like that's like I remember DC people saying, "Oh, that's an unconditional."
50 years ago, Buffalo was a non-traditional market, but no,
that's ridiculous.
Russ has got to go in about 5 minutes, so I want to get to coaching stuff first, and then we can go back to the GM of the Year stuff.
That's okay.
So Spencer Carberry gets hired in Washington.
No brainer.
John Hines gets relieved in Nashville, and they bring in Andrew Brunette. And Russ, there's talk about that in between now and the beginning of the Stanley Cup Final, that the Rangers will make their choice on the coach. And it sounds like right now Laviolette's the leader going around the post, going to the far turn toward the finish line.
Yeah, he's the leader, but I don't think he can see the finish line, because I think Sheldon Keefe has a chance here.
Yeah.
And they're going to wait out the Leafs and see what they're going to do. That's why I think the Rangers are waiting, because they already know what they have in Laviolette, but I believe they want to talk to Keefe in the worst way if he's available. And I think they're going to wait it out. And I think that's the smart thing to do, because even though they gave up the field, they were in the team that was in this in the first place the earliest.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the end, they're probably doing a good job of this. Like, I don't think they were going to hire Brunette. I think that is a good hire in Nashville. I think New York, I don't know if that would have been the best place for him. So I think that made sense, and maybe the Rangers saw that too. But I think they're going to wait on Sheldon Keefe. I don't think Laviolette has it locked up yet.
No, but the news regarding Toronto is that they're going to let the GM make the decision on Keefe. And we don't know when they're going to hire the GM. It could be I mean, the clock is ticking. You would think that it would be sometime this week, but right now Shanahan is doing interviews. He's not like prepared. Their draft meetings are going on in Kamloops right now, and Shanahan's in Toronto doing interviews. And Kev, the one interesting name, because we've heard Brad Treliving, and then we'll get back to the GM thing that Brad Treliving was the name that's been mentioned a lot. But yesterday, Elliot Friedman mentioned a name that really intrigued me, and that was Doug Wilson. And if Doug Wilson is healthy, and apparently Doug Wilson, we don't know specifically what the health issue was. It was not COVID, but it was something that forced him to resign last year. But his name popped up in relation to Philadelphia and the team presidency, and now pops up as a possible GM candidate in Toronto. If they get Doug Wilson, that's a grand slam, because he's well respected in this league.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's very true. And he's also a guy that, we've talked about this before, managing up. He always has a good he had a great relationship with ownership in San Jose. And I think that's crucial, when you're trying to accomplish things. You want to be able to, get the cooperation of ownership. And he's always had that. He's a guy that handles the budget well. He's known for that. I think that would be a really good idea. He'll be, he's got a little, he's not quite as, he's not Iserman or Lamoriello, but he has a pretty close shop. So there won't be a lot of stuff leaking out, but I think he'd be a great choice. I'm with you on that, Mike.
It'd be a tough one in terms of the fact that, he's coming. I mean, he has spent his entire career as a GM basically in a market that has 2 reporters.
Yeah, no, I mean, it'd be an adjustment, but he was in Chicago as a player, and he's a Canadian boy who's always had to deal with the media. I mean, he was a top defenseman, so.
Oh yeah, he's a good. I mean, I think I respect him a ton, and I think it's a solid pick. I would be very interested to see how he does.
Yeah, but I mean, it will be an adjustment for him for sure. He'll, instead of having 2 people, calling him 4 times a year, he's going to have 20 calls a day. Yeah,
2 people call him every hour at least.
And the whole Dubas thing. I mean, it's supposedly coming to a head the next couple days. Zach, whether he decides to take the Pittsburgh job or wait out what apparently, based on what group gets the Ottawa job, or the Ottawa ownership, it might be a group that he has some relation to, and he might be aiming for that job because that group would get rid of Dorian and get rid of DJ Smith. That's why I don't know about Keefe and the Rangers, because if Dubas goes to Ottawa, then Sheldon Keefe is the Senators coach.
Oh boy. I mean, do they have to stay? Are absolutely?
No, he just did. I mean,
they have to stay together. I'm not saying anything against him, but
but if he likes him and believes him as a coach, then he's won with him. He won with him with the Marlies. He won with him up to a point when Sault Ste. Marie. I don't see a problem there.
Yeah, but he may want to disassociate himself from that. You don't want to have.
Sure.
So he's a smart guy. Like, I don't know whether he would do that.
Because if it feels like, we gotta hire. If we hire Dubas, we gotta hire Keith. That's
but in Pittsburgh, in Pittsburgh, that won't be a problem because Sullivan is firmly ensconced there, and if he takes that job,
right, and that's the perfect out for him because he doesn't have to worry about.
Yeah,
it.
but honestly, I mean, it's going to be hard. I mean, Pittsburgh's in a untenable position of trying to get better when they're committed to 3 players and they don't have no one coming, and contrast that with Ottawa, who has one of the best collections of young players going. Like, as much as they've got Crosby and Malkin, you have an old Crosby and Malkin, and you go to Ottawa where they have great young players that are going to be good for a long time.
They have a nice blend in Ottawa going forward.
They just need a couple things, and if you get the opportunity, and I'm sure if you get the opportunity to stick it to your former team, playing in their division and potentially facing them in the playoffs, that's always a cherry on top of the sundae.
I don't know with him. I don't get that sense necessarily, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm
not saying he's vengeful. I'm just saying
that's talking
that's a plus.
I do worry a little bit about, we should not get into this now because it'd be a huge conversation, but I do worry about a little bit how his whole departure and the way it went down affects some of the players there as far as their signing long term. I think that there's some issues with that, and it didn't go down as smoothly as anybody would have liked it to on any side. Like, so it's not maybe. I mean,
Well, there hasn't been any news revealed regarding the PA investigation of Dubas's relationship with the same agency that represents Matthews. So I don't know if that's going to go anywhere, whether that'll ever be public or not. But that, in the wake of Dubas being dismissed, that was something that came up, that is a little complicated, but I don't think there was any sort of like chicanery there. The agent was somebody who represented golf pros for the same agency and had nothing to do with hockey players. So I don't know.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kev. Your thoughts on
Well,
that?
I mean, we've talked about this before, but you know, you can see why the PA doesn't want that to happen. But as I tried to explain, like there's no, basically the party here that would be in trouble would be the agent. That's all. I mean, it's not like anybody's done anything wrong. I mean, Kyle Dubas can get anybody in the world he wants to represent him. That's his choice. So this is just an agent, and I'm sure with the way the agent comes, he says, well, he's just doing. He's a part of our organization, but he's not doing players. He's just doing this guy. But it's still part of the organization, and the PA has been clear about that. If you're going to represent players, you got to divorce yourself from the coaches, and that's exactly what happened when this rule was passed. I don't remember who the particulars were, but there were guys that were representing both coaches and players, and they made them divest of all their coaches.
I would love to get Bill Zito on this comment, because I know that when he left the agency to become a general manager, there was a lot of things that had to happen in the agency that he founded, like a lot of disassociation, a lot of selling off of everything that he, and yet that is Acme agency, which still exists now with Marco now at the head of it. That they did do a deal with like an Alex Lyon type. There are some players who represented. Yeah, but that's like you say, Kevin. No one. He's still allowed to sign players from that agency that he used to work for, that he used to own, that he had started. Yeah. But there was a lot of paperwork that went into it, as far as what you could and could not do, just to avoid the appearance of evil, to avoid the conflict of interest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a good rule. I mean, it's all in good intention. You just don't want any impropriety or any perception of impropriety.
Yeah.
But to your point, Eck, I mean. I've heard many people say that Austin Matthews wasn't going to sign before July 1st anyway, even if Dubas was there. It's just more now. Matthews has made it clear he wants to stay in Toronto, but he also has made it clear over the last couple of years he only wants to stay in Toronto if Toronto is interested in being a competitive team competing for a Stanley Cup. Like if they all of a sudden decided to do a rebuild, then he's probably not going to re-sign there. But the question is, he's got a lot of leverage now. And in terms of I want to play with Mitch Marner. I want to play. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, Mitch Marner has a no move clause that kicks in on July 1st. Well, so after July 1st, the Leafs can't trade Mitch Marner, but they can trade William Nylander because he has a 10-team no trade that kicks in July 1st. That means he can be traded to 21 other teams.
Right. So, right. Yeah.
There's still a lot of flexibility.
What have you learned about the so-called calls to the players saying that they were fine, they were safe? Do we know was it just Matthews or was it all four?
No, it was all four. But the report was that Shanahan said, obviously, it's going to be up to the new general manager. Of course, he had to put a caveat there, and you knew that was going to be the case. You can't guarantee all four of these guys you're definitely going to be back. That neuters a general manager. So he says, calm down, guys. Everything is going to be fine. But new general manager comes in and says, I think this core needs to be blown up. Then he's going to blow up the core. That's part of it.
Because he's not hiring a general manager that's going to blow up the core.
No,
that's why I think Shanahan could say that. No GM is going to take that job because he's not going to march in and say, you're going to have to blow this up if you want me. I don't think anybody's going to do that. So
but I do think it would be stupid to do that. They would be stupid to blow it up. I mean, honestly, they're still a really good team.
I mean, I'm sorry, and I'll say this until I'm blue in the face. Mm-hmm. This core will never win.
Yeah, they just don't know how to do it.
They don't know how to do it. And like you've said, Kev, when they do it, then they'll know how to do it. I get that.
Yeah.
They've not win the first round.
Yeah, okay, but you were the one who pointed out that Tampa Bay was, on fumes.
Oh, of course, no, they were on fumes. But then they ran up against the team that could maybe win the Stanley Cup again, which they've done many times, by the way, right? I mean, Boston. How many times have they lost in these playoffs when people were like, "Oh, they're terrible," but they end up losing to the team that wins the Stanley Cup?
Teams that got to the finals, Montreal, Washington,
even the Cup. Yeah. I mean, they have lost to good teams. I mean,
by Florida. Both. I mean, Vegas is in the finals because they were the best team in the West, and
Yeah.
Florida's in the finals because they were the best team in the East. I don't even think it was close.
I don't believe, Kevin, this is the other thing. I'm trying to do research on it, and maybe someone has done research, and I've been dealing with all kinds of stuff here, so I haven't been that tuned into the news or what people are writing. But I was trying to think of find a team that has beaten the first, second, and fourth team to get to the
No, yeah, they've followed that all the way through. They are the first team to have done that.
And they're probably the first team also to
Yeah.
beaten teams with more points above them. Like the amount of points that they were behind all three of those teams.
The only team that might have come close is the 2012 Kings, because they beat the number 1 seed in the first. They made the playoffs the last day of the regular season, and then they beat, I think, Vancouver in the first round. And then they would have. I'm not sure who they played after that, but Vancouver was the top seed in the West in 2012.
One I thought of, Mike, was the Montreal team that took out Pittsburgh and Washington in the first 2 rounds.
Right, but then they lost.
They lost to Philly, but they took out those. I mean, they took out Pittsburgh and Washington were, I think, the 2 top teams, or at least 2 of the 3 top teams at that time. But yeah, that's an astonishing thing. I'm sure that played out. But I just think
the GM voting.
Yes, the GM vote. What do you guys think? Who do you think?
I think
let people vote on 3 finalists.
I think it would have been Don Sweeney, because Boston was the.
But they vote, well into the playoffs. So I'm going to say Zito, because the team was playing so well.
Yeah. Well, the answer was Zito. Surprisingly enough, I was kind of surprised by it, honestly. And I'm trying to bring up the exact numbers, but yeah, it was really again, wasn't super close. But the interesting thing about this with Zito has been, so Zito had 59% of the votes, and the other 2 split basically the other rest of it. What is kind of surprising is that Zito's group is kind of split into 2. Like, as far as people either think he should definitely get this or shouldn't get it at all. And that comes down to, like, this year. Well, he didn't do anything this year. People who hate him, he didn't do anything this year. But Kachuk, obviously, new coach, Paul Maurice. Those are 2 pretty big things. But he didn't do, he did all those things last year that didn't work, right? So it's tough, right? So but I've always said this should be the GM award should be based on the last 5 years. every year based on the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a little bit of a mystery. So do you count the stuff they did going into the season, or it's really unclear. It's almost like whose turn is it? And who's had a good year and whose turn is it? That you mold those 2 together. So
and results have mattered a lot in it, but it almost shouldn't in some weird ways to me. It should matter to a little bit, but all right, Zito was 45 seconds from being beaten in Game 7 by the Bruins. If he gets beaten there, there's no way he's up for this award, right? So, because even though they gave the Bruins a battle, that's not going to be enough to win this award.
Right.
But so instead they tie it with their goalie pulled. So Brandon Montour is the reason that Zito could get the GM of the Year award. It's like the reality is that.
Well, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that the who wins the award would be based on the parameters of when, from when, if it's July 1 to the second round of the playoffs. So then you have to include the Kachuk deal and everything that they did. Then okay, because Kachuk is right now.
I do think they've counted that, though. Because
they do.
I think because the team was winning, they said, well, why are they winning? Well, that Kachuk deal was a thing of beauty.
Right.
And, so people look at that. But, there are no parameters. That's what I'm saying. It's really unclear. It's just sort of a feel deal. So, it just hasn't,
it's not one of your favorite awards, is it?
Well, no, it just, it's really unclear what it's about. And I think that they've made it worse by saying, not voting until you're halfway in. So now we got all the other awards, with clear line.
You're right.
Right. Regular season. And then this one, we got 1 foot in the playoffs and 1 foot in the regular season. So
if you're going to go 2 rounds of the playoffs, why are we not going the whole playoffs, Kevin? Can you actually?
Right.
What is the point of this?
Yeah, we want to get it ready for the television awards.
Well, no, because
How long will that take?
you know why, Ack? Because whoever wins the Stanley Cup is going to win GM of the year. That's why.
But
You know, so-
that's what you're kind of saying now. And I mean, not you're saying whoever wins the first 2 rounds of the playoffs is going to win GM of the year basically now, right? So, and I mean, so Sweeney, look at Sweeney. He made the most moves. He made a ton of moves. He made a ton of interesting moves. He made his team better because of the injuries. He definitely helped that team get through. That record is stands on its own. Of course, it's a phenomenal record.
Don't you think, Eck, that Sweeney does have a chance to win it because his regular season was so incredible?
Yeah.
I do, and I think it's kind of a toss up between him and Zito, in my opinion. And and Nil also had a great year too, for sure. And Nil's another example of like, okay, let's take the last 3 years. Nil's done a great job of getting them to where they are now,
Right?
And, which Bill Zito has too. So Zito has been, when he was a rookie, he was a finalist for this. Lou Lamoriello won it for the Islanders. When last year Zito had the best team in the league during the regular season, just like Sweeney, but not of course not as dominant, but just like Sweeney, lost in the first round. I lost in the second round, where Sweeney lost in the first round. Zito was not even mentioned, not even a finalist last year. After having the President's Trophy.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's a very confusing award, and to be honest though, like I thought the award really is a good idea. I mean, why wouldn't you? Architect of the year essentially is what they're trying to get. But when you don't define, from what to what, you have this confusion, and like Mike brought up, just right on the money. Like you just don't know. Was it July? Is it July 1 to? Yeah. So do we count like when if you,
July 1? I mean, you have that only counts on this year. It wouldn't count on last year's because that happened after anything happened after the voting from the last time should count on this one.
Right. No, it should. Yeah. So
it does, I think, and I think that's how they look at it. But Kachuk, so and I think, and I do think that Zito was punished last year for his trade deadline moves. Like I think that at the end of the day, he gave up a lot for Sherrod.
A
lot for Giroux. He gave up first round draft picks and didn't, and it didn't help. So that's a direct GM thing. They don't get any further. But then again, they lose to Tampa, who was phenomenal. So the whole thing is, but he got swept by Tampa. So that also played into it, right? So there was a lot of different things there last year. It's a tough one. I really do think that it would be better off served as the GM over the last 3 years, just making it like, okay, taking this year and the last 2 years before that into account every year. And then you can sit back and say, okay, because GM plans are at least 3 years long, at least, if not more. You know what I mean? So why not look at
but the problem with that is, sometimes it takes a GM 3 years to do sometimes it takes it 2. So,
right.
So then it's, so what if those 2 guys come up at the same time? Like who gets the award,
Right, but if you just said to yourself, okay, we're going to look at that team, like what you're doing now for the GM of the year is you're looking for the coach of the year. What we do is we look at the team last year versus the team this year, right? And the biggest difference, right? And usually it's the biggest improvement, usually.
Yeah, well, what if you just said, look, on whatever day it is that you vote, on May 20th,
right.
On May 20th, whoever GM in the league you respect the most, that's who wins.
You respect the most.
Respect the most on that day.
Respect the most. So that's talk about vague, Kev. That's like.
Well, that's. I mean, I'm obviously being facetious because I think that's.
You think that's what it is?
That's kind of what we're doing now.
There's no specific criteria here.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to put it. I'm trying to say, okay.
I mean, okay,
where they are now versus where they were at the end of 2019.
Well, let's. I don't even know the answer to this. Let's look up, Mike. You're very good at this. Call up what the criteria says. It's out there. I mean, is some criteria, but I always thought it was pretty vague.
Okay.
So,
yeah, and this is Brian Burke's award, right? Like Brian Burke is the one who came up with this idea. Thought it should be a award, got it pushed through.
Yeah, and I don't think he ever won, did he?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
And it does deserve noting, like and listen, I mean, what do awards do really? They give guys the ability to like negotiate bigger contracts. That's what awards are, right? So essentially that's what Burke's saying. Burke's saying if I'm the GM of the year, I can ask for more money.
Well, I mean, I think like I said, I think the idea is good.
Yeah.
But I think first of all you should take it out of the hand, like the GM shouldn't be voting on it.
That's also right.
Yeah. So I think you need to have that it should go to the writers of the broadcasters. And let
Especially weird, Kevin, that the GM
let them have their say, and then it should really just be for the regular season. So
think about this: if you were traded like the Pacioretty trade or something like that, like a trade that somebody trades you a guy that turns out to be like hurt and doesn't work out. You know, not saying they knew that or anything like that, but man, are you going to turn around and then as a GM vote for that guy who's kind of screwed you over?
yeah.
You know, why are the GMs voting for this award? Why would the GMs?
Well, I mean, it's a panel, but GMs are on it. So
yeah, no, it's the GMs and it's 41 voters, including NHL executives. But the only criteria, according to NHL.com, is it just says the Jim Gregory GM of the Year award is presented annually to the league's most outstanding general manager. That's all. That's all it says.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So now I thought there was a little more than that, but obviously
that is almost as vague as the one you most respect, Kevin. You're pretty close.
Yeah. I mean, that was my point that I was making. I mean, it's just that nebulous, you know. Like, yeah. Let's. Who do you like? Who's your favorite GM today? You know.
Who stands out the most? Basically, they're asking. So
yeah. It's like homecoming king. You know.
That's awesome.
You can
totally agree.
Algorithm to determine the NHL general manager of the year.
Yeah, a popular kid. If that's the case, then I think Jim Nill would win this award. Because
yeah, you're right, and he's got no chance this year, I think.
Right, exactly. But he's definitely the most popular of those three GMs, I think, as far as everybody goes.
For sure. Don't you think he's the most likable general manager in the league?
Yes, I do.
It's hard not to think of him in terms of, you know, how open-minded he is, and you know how pleasant he is, and so.
Oh yeah, and there's some stories that I've heard and you've heard, I'm sure, that where he's helped out other GMs that you can't even share. Like he's been very, very good, with people. And
yeah,
one time I went to you with a question about GM, and you said you should have that GM called Jim Nill. I remember that. It's just like that.
Yeah.
He's the guy. He's the guy who's the most. He's got he's just going to help you. He's level-headed. He's smart.
I'll tell you this story, and I think I've told it before, but it bears repeating. When I won the Lester Patrick Award, I ended up chatting with Jim Nill before the event, where the end, and I goes, when we were done chatting, I said, "Where are you sitting?" And he said, "I'm sitting with you guys." And he had asked for a seat when he realized that we only had 7 people at our table. He said that he asked whether he could be put at my family table. So Jim Nill sat with us at the Allen family table. I mean, he's just such a nice guy. You know what I mean? That's just who he is.
Yeah.
So, you know, when I won the no, never mind.
No, you're totally right. It's pretty crazy, and I really definitely think that he, So I don't know how they're going to determine this. I think if my guess is, it's going to come down to Sweeney, but Sweeney's got some detractors out there, though. Sweeney's not. There are people who are.
Yeah, but I think I mean, it's hard to argue, not knowing what the criteria is.
Right.
It's hard to argue. Like, he had the most incredible regular season in the history of the game. Like, it's hard to argue with that fact. And there were people saying they were going to be a mess, and they were not a mess.
They weren't a mess. And there's also the people saying that he is the first GM that anybody could ever remember who would fire a coach with like 50 plus wins because a couple players on his team told him to do so. That's a little strange.
We just fired coaches. I think this is the year of the exit interview. Like, I think for sure Sutter was fired because of the exit interviews. And I think there are other coaches too that were fired because of exit interviews.
Well, Kev, like I said, I was 10 feet away from a general manager essentially giving the organization the ammo to fire him because Kyle Dubas opening the door with the concerns about the job and the family that led to him getting dismissed. I mean, yeah, you can lose the job. I mean, heck, it was because it was Patrice Bergeron
and David Krejci.
David Krejci but David Krejci left for Czechia because of.
I would say it's even more David Krejci, and not in some ways, but I mean, no, it's more Bergeron. But knowing that Krejci will return if you get rid of your coach.
But who in the end has the last laugh? If Bruce Cassidy wins the Stanley Cup with Vegas,
true,
he's got the last. I mean, Don Sweeney did everything he possibly could as general manager. He goes out and makes the Tyler Bertuzzi deal. He goes out and trades for Orloff and Hathaway. And the reason that they lost to Florida, give Florida all the credit in the world.
No, you're not going to give Florida.
No, but I'm also
why they blew it.
Well, no, not blew it, but Patrice Bergeron getting hurt in the last game of the regular season because he wanted to play in Montreal in front of his family, and Krejci getting hurt late in the season. Like, there were contributing factors to the reason why Boston lost. I'm not taking anything away from Florida because what they did was miraculous.
Yeah.
I have a feeling.
Yeah, I mean that there's always contributing factors, but
Sure.
It's teams don't always blow it. The other team sometimes wins it. So.
Sure.
Yeah, well, in this case, it was and actually, it's always a combination of both. So it's always a combination of a team blowing it and a team winning it, right? Because that's what has to happen.
Yeah, I would say so, but we tend to concentrate more on, and that's really been a recent phenomenon. Like, I think it's only about 20 years old. In the old days, we used to highlight the offensive players, and now we pass blame. But the reason we pass blame in the media is because we were taught that by coaches. Because
players. Like, I was listening to Jamie Benn last night, interview. He said,
yeah, but it was coaches that started it. In the old days, we would run to the TV to write down what great move the guy had made to score the winning goal. And then because for 2 years, coaches started talking about the breakdowns and mistakes, we started to see it in those terms. And then we started running to the television, writing down, like, who caught that puck up, who got caught up ice. All of a sudden we were talking about those kinds of things. And I think it was because the coaches started looking at the game differently.
And I'm going to say that's because of talk radio, Kevin. I'm going to tell you why. Because this is the reason for that. Because coaches go out to their press conference, and if they say out there in the internet and all kinds of chat rooms and all things like that, and Hockey Buzz and all the things that are to blame, but if the coach goes out there and says that other team was just better than us, basically, the better team won. They do say that sometimes.
Yeah.
The coaches do say that. They're the coaches who are entrenched in their jobs. Like, otherwise, people are going to say, "Well, they're better than you. Well, then you should be out of there because that's not good." I think that really they have to almost say that when they're trying to fight for their job.
Yeah, I mean, I've known goalies tell me that other goalies have urged them that never accept blame. Because your GM and your coach will read that, and
they'll see you as weak.
Yeah,
and coaches.
Yeah, I mean, what Dubas said the other day. I mean, I remember saying afterward that I thought, like, Steve Yzerman's in that mode. Like, he would not have tolerated that either. Like, that's
right.
not. You're going to complain about. Like, do you think Steve Yzerman has ever felt overwhelmed? Ever. Like, I didn't see that, but subsequent to that, I've kind of talked around the league, and most general managers, are felt that way. Like, oh my God.
Partially, it played into the other problem that everyone always thinks about Dubas is that he's immature and young.
Yeah, I mean, I bet there are a lot more who felt the same way Dubas said. They just wouldn't have said it publicly.
Of course, right? And it's the immaturity and young
Yeah.
youth that enabled him to be like honest. Like,
Yeah, well, absolutely, and it goes to the Robin Leonard thing about you can't speak about things like this because we're such a macho sport. So,
or Markstrom this year, who came out and said, "I've forgotten how to play goalie," like things like that just don't work. You can't say that stuff, and it ends up playing out the wrong way. But yeah, I mean, when I was listening to Ben last night, because I was watching that game last night, you really did feel like Vegas was a better team. Like, you just felt like they're better, and it's there's nothing against Dallas did a good job to fight back and win 2 games, but Vegas, when they put their act together, they're just better. I mean, they are better than Dallas, and that's not a knock on anybody, right? Because they did it. I mean, Dallas had the better goalie, but Vegas still managed to beat them up. So I don't know, like I said, my wife wanted Dallas to win because Vegas is too new in the league. She carried on that stereotype. I don't know. But I thought, when I was looking at we'll get into this matchup, of course, later in the week, but, I don't know who was going to be the matchup of Florida or Vegas, who was going to be better for Florida, Vegas, or Dallas, but we'll talk about that as we get to the rest of the week. But that's all the time we have for today, folks. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you all tomorrow.